Okay, so it shoots the bullet, and the bullet appears still. Now, presumably, maybe there's a little blurriness or something. Well, let's say the camera's really, really fast and it can take what appears to you to be a still picture. How is it the case that something moving could appear still? That's a mystery. Okay, so what this seems to imply is motion can be verified. Okay, to actually be a set of still motions. If that's the case, then this would function as another possible reason to take this flashing reality business seriously. Okay, so let's continue on. Recall above we mentioned briefly that time is ubiquitously believed. Ubiquitously means all over. By people, believed all over the place by people to be a series, a set of moments or time instants all connected in a flowing collection. But notice that each of the moments can't be related or connected to each other. They can't interact with each other for the following reasons. Okay, so what we're saying here is that the average person, whether you're a professional philosopher or Ralph the homeless guy, or whoever you are, the average person thinks of time kind of like this. Here's a present moment, here's future moment 1, here's future moment 2, and so forth. Here's past moment 1, here's past moment 2, and so forth. Okay? Most people, whether they know it or not, are thinking about time like that. Okay? But of course, in the flashing reality looks like that. Only a still present moment. There is no past or future. Okay? And for the reasons we're going to explain here next. And the reasons are because, as you'll see, moments can't be connected to each other. It appears. Okay, let's take, let me explain this to you and then we'll read what's in these notes here. Okay, and this comes from, I don't know anybody who's written on this. I'm sure there are other people, anybody except me. This paper here that I was mentioning a few minutes ago, the Our Theory of Time, Replacement Presentism, Indian Journal of Buddhist Studies by me. What's the date here? Number 6, 2005. This is a longer version. This reasoning is in that paper. And I'm sure there's been other philosophers through history that have written on this. I'm sure I'm not the one who thought this up. Okay, because this is very obvious. I'm sure I just missed it. I bet Islamic philosophers, somewhere back in medieval Islamic philosophy, wrote on it. So, but anyway, what the argument says is the following. If there's a moment here that's present, okay, and we want to have time as a stream of moments that are related to each other, to compose, a flowing stream of time. Well, there's a big problem with trying to connect moments because, if you have a present moment here, and say one past moment, it doesn't really matter if it's close in time to the present or far back, whatever, let's just say they're each related to each other. What you're asserting then is that something touches the past moment, touches the present moment also, to connect those, to form a flow of time of more than one moment, or a series of moments. Okay, well, there's a huge problem with this idea of a connector. Okay, because you just make it a little bit bigger over here, so past moment 1 and present moments. See, the connector, or whatever it is, touches, so to speak, the present moment, but also touches the past moment. That would mean that the present, or the connector, the relationship between these time moments, is both present and past. In other words, present and non-present. But that's a contradiction. There's something can't be present and not present. Can't have both of those properties together. Maybe if it had different parts, and maybe there was half of it. This half of it's in the present, and this half of it's in the past. Well, that would seem to solve it, right? You say, okay, we don't want to say the whole thing has those properties. We want to say different aspects. No, this part of this half of it here has a property, so it's not a contradiction. So you're saying one property applies to one half, another property applies to the other. So the contradiction doesn't emerge. Because the contradiction would be like saying Ryan is sleeping and not sleeping, or standing and not standing, or he's a man and not a man. Or we don't want to. Nobody talks in those terms. Because why? Because nobody understands those terms, because nobody knows what contradictions are. Okay? So then you can say, well, let's divide into parts. But what happens right here when the parts touch? Same problem emerges, doesn't it? The present item touches the past item. So that means at that exact point, blow it up here and make it a little bit bigger, where the present and the past touch, there's going to be an interface there where they touch, and at that point is present and not present again. So the contradiction is, we can divide it into, you can say, well, let's divide it into more parts. Let's have the interface, have more parts. The same thing will emerge. So this contradiction seems to be the case if you have any sort of time flow of moments that are related or connected to each other, a contradiction of that sort emerges. So it would seem to be the case that you can't have a time flow like that, if this is all correct. Okay? So that would be evidence for the flashing reality. All right, so let's read through this part of these notes right here. So this example is talking about the bullet example. This passage is talking about the bullet example that I just brought up. And it's saying that one moment in the time stream and the next moment, well, nobody really knows how two moments can be next to each other, because we've seen there's always time between. We'll talk about that later this semester. So one moment and a moment close to it that existed at a different place in the time stream, say right before, in the future, right after the past. They cannot interact with each other in any way, because if they did, they'd have to be at the same place in the time stream to some degree while they were existing. And the times would be at the same place in time, and thus would touch. Thus, past would touch future in some way. They can pass in the future the same times, which of course is this absurdity, this contradiction right there. Okay? So if you try to say that there's an intermediary of some sort, which we just got done doing, like a relationship between the times, which is what almost every philosopher, professional philosopher does, well, the problem there is that the contradiction just emerges with the intermediary, the connector, the relationship. Okay, so it doesn't matter, because at some point within the intermediary, present has to turn into future, and thus touching of past and future would take place. And thus there's an overlap in time of past and future, meaning they are at the same position in the time stream, and thus the intermediary would involve the aforementioned contradiction, present equals future. People don't really know what time is, right? Just like we don't really know what cause and effect is. We don't know how to, we can see and feel them, but we don't know how to describe them with language, as we're discussing here. So let me make a comment here on this. So, which leads to this conclusion. So apparently all of reality involves unconnected times. Well, if that's the case, it would appear that only a present moment exists. Or that's all we can know of is the present moment. All right, and if the present is going to change at all, we saw from the last class discussing the problem of change, it appears it'll have to flip in and out of existence, since it can't be, if it's not connected to any other moments, it can't be causally generated by a previous moment. Okay, cause and effect can't account for change in time. Instead, something else, like maybe occasionalism. Remember we talked about that at the end of the last class, which we'll be talking about again on Thursday and in next week. So does anybody have any questions on this? It's basically just saying, if you have the still bullet, you can take all the pictures you want of the bullet coming out of the gun. Okay? And they're all going to appear still. And you might wonder, what do these moments have to do with each other? Because this one, say this one's at time 1, this one's at time 2. This, oops, I should go the other way. Time 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want to say, well, they're all related, they're different stages, or they're different, pieces of the existence of the bullet as it travels from A to B. Okay, that's what's called the temporal parts theory. You don't have to know this, I'm just going to tell you. You'll see it show up in the Taylor book later. Saying that things have different parts in time. To take the whole complete you have to consider the different states you're in at every time throughout your life from birth to death. Okay? That's great. Sounds wonderful. But try to describe how they're interrelated to form one entity, one whole entity, rather than four, disconnected parts, and then you go straight into this problem, which thus appears to lead to the possibility of this kind of scenario being how reality is. And we've got several pieces of evidence piling up. We can take pictures of still bullets. It appears quantum particles appear to be flashing out of existence. It appears if we try to describe motion and time, they fall into contradiction, which is solved by asserting that reality is a set of still moments flashing out of existence. So I'm not trying to argue this position. I'm just saying as an interesting philosophical exercise, this problem of change, which was known in the ancient world and has been studied ever since, has a lot of implications which have some pieces of evidence for it, which is rather interesting. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Now the Buddhist philosophers also were onto this. Now this, okay, let me find out what page this is on. This is pages 48 and 49 in your notes I'm going to go to next. Just real briefly. So we're skipping all of this stuff. Okay, so let's just talk about this briefly. This won't be on your quiz. This right here. This section, but you could use this in your paper, okay, or on one of your midterm or final. So before moving on, let's discuss some types of atoms. So some of the somewhat ancient Buddhist philosophers were on to all of this stuff. They knew all this business. Atoms are made of energy. They flash out of existence, and so forth. Here's a quote from a philosopher named, it looks like Stitcher-Batsky, but his name's pronounced Cherbatsky. Sounds Russian, but if I recall, he's from Belgium. So the Buddhist, here's a famous book you wrote called Buddhist Logic. The first volume, it's in 2 volumes. Volume 1 has this quote: the Buddhists deny the existence of substantial matter altogether. Movement consists for them of moments, staccato movement. Okay? Momentary flashes of the stream of energy. Sound familiar? It sounds exactly, so everything is evanescent. This is a quote from the book that Buddha wrote, or we think Buddha wrote, called Dhammapada. Might have been that some of his followers wrote it instead of him. He uses this, well, the word is translated as evanescent. Everything's like a bubbling froth. There is no stuff, there's just fleeting energy. So that is pretty interesting that Buddhists were onto some of this, okay? Because to my knowledge, nobody else in the world describes what is now being discovered by scientists as accurately as right here. I can't find those. Oh, that's a bummer. All right, well, you can have those if you want. I guess I should probably maybe suggest that before. Sorry. Does anybody have any questions on this Buddhist business? Okay, I'm going to go then to go back up to pages 29 27 through 29. There's a group of Greek philosophers here on page 27 called the Cyrenaics, who, like most of the philosophers in the ancient world, they were concerned with this problem of change. See, in the modern world now, in general, almost every philosopher will say something like this: well, the problem of change is a big problem. We don't know how to describe time and causation and things like this, how to describe change. But we can see it happening, so it must happen. It must just be the case that we haven't learned how to describe it yet. So maybe we'll need another 2,500 years, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. So in other words, what they do is they trust their senses, not the logic. Now, which is kind of a good idea, right? That would be an empirical perspective, okay? The problem is the empirical perspective sometimes is wrong. So probably a better position would be to say, I'm not sure which is right. The problem of change seems incredibly solid. There's pieces of evidence showing up here and there from philosophy and science that seem to indicate this staccato motion that, to put it in Buddhist terms, is what reality is like. But, so I see reality one way, and logically it tells me it's another way, so I'm not sure which is the case. That's the position I hold. That's what philosophers should really hold. However, they don't, typically, and instead, they just assume that the problem of change is something that we solve soon. So when we start the next class, we'll start talking about the Cyrenaics, who are a group of philosophers who took the flashing reality extremely seriously. And they, for example, would say things like, hey, there's my life's going to end in one instant, so there's no tomorrow, so I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. Who cares about anything? Okay, so we'll start right up there on Thursday, and have a nice 2 days.